Claire lay wide awake in her bed, listening to the shifting noises of the old house as the night deepened. The faint hum of the air conditioner blended with distant creaks of wood settling under the cool weight of darkness. Moonlight spilled through the half-closed blinds, casting elongated shadows that rippled faintly with each breath of wind. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed 2:13 a.m., numbers sharp and red against the gloom. A soft creak echoed from the hallway just beyond her closed door, too subtle to be dismissed. She tensed, heart rate quickening, ears straining for further sound. The air felt thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth, as though the outside had seeped through the cracks. A chill traced her spine, and the sensation of unseen eyes on her skin became impossible to ignore. She told herself it was nothing, just her imagination playing tricks, but her limbs remained frozen. The silence thickened around her, pressing down like a suffocating weight. Gathering courage, Claire swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet brushing the cold floorboards. She hesitated, listening to the emptiness of the house, the steady ticking of the clock filling the void. With each step toward the bedroom door, the chill intensified, as if invisible fingers trailed along her skin. Her hand trembled as it hovered above the doorknob, finally twisting it open. The hallway beyond was shrouded in darkness, only faint silver light leaking from the kitchen at the far end. Something was off. The shadows shifted almost imperceptibly, and she could feel a subtle pulse beneath her feet, like the house itself was breathing. Her throat tightened. She should call out, break the silence, but her voice caught. Instead, she slipped into the hallway, swallowed by the waiting dark. Claire tiptoed down the hall, her footsteps swallowed by the thick carpet runner beneath her. The kitchen doorway yawned ahead, its faint light shimmering from the moonlit window above the sink. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint scent of damp stone and something metallic. As she neared the kitchen, she noticed the faucet dripping into the stainless steel sink, the sound unnervingly loud in the hush. She hadn't left it running. Her breath hitched. She reached out with trembling fingers to tighten the handle, but a shadow flickered at the edge of her vision. It darted from the corner of the room, vanishing behind the tall refrigerator. Heart hammering, she swallowed a cry, backing toward the doorway. The refrigerator hummed softly, but beneath it something shifted. A faint scuffle, as if something was crouched, waiting. The kitchen's moonlight trembled, and she realized she wasn't alone. Backing into the hallway, Claire's breath came shallow, her ears tuned to every creak and whisper of the house. The kitchen light seemed to dim as though smothered by something unseen, and a chill bloomed at her nape. Desperation gripped her. She turned and half ran toward the living room, the dim outline of the couch and armchair emerging like comforting sentinels. The room was darker than she remembered, shadows curling in the corners like smoke. She hesitated at the threshold, her pulse drumming against her ribs. The faint scent of damp earth followed her, thick and cloying now. Something rustled behind her, an almost inaudible scrape against the floor. She turned sharply, but the hallway was empty. Yet the weight of invisible eyes pressed down. A low, almost inaudible hum filled the air, rising from the walls themselves. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, her breath ragged. She was no longer alone. The living room felt colder than the rest of the house, its silence deeper, heavier. Claire's trembling hands brushed against the back of the couch, anchoring her to something familiar. She turned toward the window, its glass darkened by the night, only the faint glow of a neighbor's porch light cutting through the gloom. But as she stared, the glow seemed to flicker, then vanish, leaving only the black reflection of her wide-eyed face. Behind her, in that mirrored glass, something stirred, something pale and long-limbed, shifting silently from shadow to shadow. Her breath caught in her throat, her pulse spiking in her ears. The hum from the walls grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards, making her teeth ache. She backed away from the window, bumping into the low coffee table with a sharp yelp. Her heart raced, her thoughts tangled. There was something wrong in the house, something waiting. Claire's frantic breathing echoed in her ears as she stumbled backward, her gaze darting between the hallway, the kitchen, and the darkened window. Every shadow seemed to thicken, pressing in like a living thing, suffocating the air. She staggered toward the back door, the one that led to the yard, her shaking fingers fumbling over the deadbolt. It stuck for a moment, then gave way with a reluctant click. As she twisted the handle, it felt slick beneath her touch, almost as though coated with condensation or something worse. The door creaked open, revealing the moonlit backyard, grass shimmering faintly under a bruised, cloud-streaked sky. The cool night air rushed against her face, momentarily refreshing, but her sense of dread didn't fade. From the far end of the yard, near the gnarled old fence, a shadow shifted, something thin slipping behind a tree. Claire's chest constricted, and she realized with chilling clarity the house wasn't the trap. The outside had been waiting for her. Claire's instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to move. The shape behind the tree seemed to melt into the shadows, then reappear closer, as if the night itself were folding it forward. She tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat. The moonlight shivered against the grass as if trembling in fear. Slowly, she backed toward the house, her hand fumbling for the doorframe behind her. She felt the rough wood under her fingers, but when she turned to look, the door was half closed, though she hadn't touched it. The crack between the door and the frame seemed impossibly dark, like a mouth stretching wide. The faint hum she'd heard earlier was louder now, a low, resonant vibration, as if the walls were whispering. A chill traced her spine as a soft knock came from the other side of the door, the side facing the yard, but she hadn't shut it. Something else had. Claire's heart thudded so loudly it seemed to drown out the low hum permeating the house. The soft knock at the door repeated, steady and patient, like the tap of long fingers waiting for permission. The backyard was shrouded in moonlit darkness, but she could sense the presence behind the door, waiting. Gathering her remaining resolve, she reached trembling fingers toward the door's edge, intending to slam it shut. But before her hand could close around the handle, the door moved on its own, slowly inching inward, as though an unseen force was beckoning her. A cold breath of air coiled around her wrist, tugging her forward. She jerked back, her foot catching on the threshold, sending her sprawling onto the living room floor. As she scrambled to her feet, the door swung wide, revealing the yard, now empty, save for a faint shadow melting into the grass. The hum rose to a high, vibrating wail that filled her head. Claire's breath came in ragged gasps as she scrambled backward, eyes darting across the living room. The shadows seemed to crawl along the walls, stretching impossibly long and distorting into unnatural shapes. The house was no longer a sanctuary, but a trap closing in around her. The faint hum grew louder, a suffocating drone vibrating through her bones. She spotted the kitchen doorway and dashed toward it, desperate for escape or even a place to hide. As she crossed the threshold, the faint scent of damp earth returned, heavier now, mingling with a coppery tang that made her stomach churn. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise as a cold wind brushed past her, though no windows were open. Somewhere in the kitchen, something whispered, just beyond hearing, like a secret calling her name. Panic surged, and she bolted for the stairs leading to the bedroom, the only room left untouched by the creeping darkness. Claire slammed the bedroom door behind her, pressing her back hard against the cold wood, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. The low hum still vibrated through the walls, but she forced herself to take slow, steady breaths, fighting the panic rising inside her. The pale, shadowy figure stood motionless in the corner, its hollow eyes fixed on her like a predator waiting for a mistake. Summoning every ounce of courage, Claire rushed to the window and flung it open. The cold night air rushed in, biting at her skin as she climbed onto the fire escape, the metal scraping painfully against her palms. Behind her, the figure hesitated, flickered like smoke, then vanished into the darkness. Without looking back, Claire dropped to the damp grass below and sprinted across the yard, over the fence, and into the safety of the glowing streetlights. The house stood silent and watchful, waiting for its next victim, but Claire was free, alive, and determined never to return. I used to love the quiet of late-night study sessions in my cramped college dorm. When the rest of the world drifted off to sleep, I found solace in the hum of my laptop and the soft rustle of pages turning. It was during one of these solitary nights that I first noticed the noise, a faint tapping, almost like fingernails brushing against my window pane. I dismissed it, thinking it was the wind or the shifting of old buildings. But when I glanced at the window, my heart jumped. I saw a shadow, distinct against the moonlight, long fingers tapping with a rhythm too deliberate to be natural. I froze, pulse racing. The shadow lingered for a moment, then vanished. I leaned closer, peering into the night, but saw nothing. Telling myself it was just my imagination, I forced myself to return to my notes. But the tapping came again, louder this time. My hands trembled as I whispered into the silence, "Who's there?" Silence thickened, and I could feel my pulse in my ears as I stared at the window, willing my brain to explain what I'd just heard. When no answer came, I cautiously inched toward it, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. The courtyard below was empty, bathed in a sickly yellow glow from the flickering streetlight. No wind stirred, and the branches of the skeletal trees were still. I waited, holding my breath, but the tapping didn't return. With a shaky laugh, I convinced myself I'd imagined it, a trick of exhaustion. I turned away from the window, returning to my desk. But no sooner had I settled into the chair than the tapping came again. This time, not from the window, but from inside the room. It was faint but unmistakable, coming from the corner behind my closet. My stomach twisted. How could it be coming from there? I froze, my breath shallow, listening intently to the rhythmic tapping that continued behind the closet. The sound was deliberate, evenly spaced, like knuckles gently rapping against the wall. My first instinct was to dismiss it as pipes settling or some creak of the old building, but deep down I knew this was different. My pulse quickened, my palms damp. I stood up, inching toward the closet, heart hammering. The tapping persisted, growing louder as if it sensed my approach. I hesitated, hand trembling near the door's handle, but then a sudden, forceful knock echoed through the room, sharp and commanding, as if demanding to be acknowledged. My knees buckled, and I stumbled backward, knocking over the lamp, sending the room into partial darkness. Shadows stretched across the walls, thick and suffocating. The tapping stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving a ringing silence behind. I stood there, barely breathing, listening to the eerie quiet that had fallen. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might echo off the walls. I backed away from the closet, my mind racing with irrational thoughts. What if someone or something was on the other side? What if it wasn't just my imagination? Suddenly, the tapping returned, more insistent this time, as though it was trying to draw me closer. The rhythmic sound felt almost mocking, urging me forward. Against my better judgment, I reached for the closet handle. My fingers hesitated, hovering over the metal, feeling its coolness seep into my skin. I braced myself, twisting the handle slowly. The door creaked open just a sliver. The tapping stopped. I stared into the narrow gap. My breath held, but I saw nothing. Just the empty darkness within. Then, with a sudden force, the door yanked inward, revealing a black void beyond. I stumbled backward, nearly falling as the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. My pulse thundered in my ears, my legs trembling beneath me. I was no longer alone in the apartment. Something unseen had claimed it. I darted to the front door, fumbling with the lock, my shaking hands failing me as the key refused to turn. I banged against the door, screaming for help, but the hallway remained eerily silent. I glanced back toward the closet, its door now sealed tight, and my stomach turned. The lights above flickered, shadows lengthening like reaching hands across the walls. The air felt heavier, as if the room itself were closing in on me. Desperation clawed at my throat, and I turned back to the door, banging and twisting the knob. Still, no response. A chill ran down my spine, and the faintest of whispers curled through the room, calling my name. I backed away from the door, unable to comprehend what was happening. The shadows in the corners pulsed and writhed, taking shapes that shouldn't exist. The air buzzed with a low hum that vibrated through my bones. I pressed myself against the far wall, heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. My reflection in the hallway mirror caught my eye, except it wasn't quite right. My mirrored self smirked, lips curling into a twisted grin, and raised a hand to wave mockingly at me. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face, and slammed my fist into the glass. The mirror shattered, fragments raining down like icy confetti. But even as the pieces scattered, I could see eyes within them, watching me from every angle. I turned away, willing myself to stay calm, though my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't feel my fingers. The shadows crept closer. The lights flickered once more, bathing the hallway in a sickly green glow before vanishing into total darkness. I groped for my phone, but its screen refused to light up. Panic clawed at my throat. From the broken mirror shards scattered on the floor, I saw shapes moving, eyes blinking, mouths whispering silent words I couldn't hear. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, my breath coming in short gasps. Something brushed against my arm, cold and insistent. I jerked away, heart hammering as I realized I wasn't alone. Whispers filled the air, low murmurs that echoed from the walls, floor, and ceiling. "Join us," they hissed in unison, rising in volume. The shadows thickened, coiling like smoke around my legs. I tried to scream, but my voice was stolen, swallowed whole by the darkness pressing in from all sides. The air was thick, suffocating. Each breath felt like inhaling ash. I clawed at my throat, stumbling through the hall as the shadows curled around me. A faint light blinked from the far end, and I lunged toward it, desperation propelling me forward. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, the sound bouncing back louder with each step. The walls pulse, as though breathing, and I could feel the floor shifting beneath my feet. My knees buckled, but I dragged myself forward, hands scraping against the jagged walls. The whispers turned into chants, their cadence rising and falling like a pulse. "Join us," they demanded, louder now, resonating in my bones. My limbs felt heavy, as if gravity itself had thickened. I reached the light, a flickering bulb in an alcove, and collapsed beneath it, gasping. My skin crawled as the shadows pressed against the thin circle of illumination. I forced myself to my feet, bracing against the cold wall, the flickering light above me growing dimmer, its glow fading into a sickly yellow. The shadows crept closer, writhing like a swarm of insects, their formless mass encroaching upon me. I backed into the corner, my pulse hammering in my ears. I could feel them brush against my skin, cold and wet like a crawling tide. Panic threatened to shatter me, but I bit down on my fear, searching for any escape. Then I saw it, barely a crack in the far wall, like a forgotten doorway, blacker than the darkness itself. Without thinking, I sprinted toward it, arms outstretched. As I lunged into the gap, the shadows shrieked, a cacophony of voices rising in fury. I fell through the crack, tumbling into complete darkness, my body twisting disoriented. The last thing I heard was the echo of their whisper, "You cannot leave." I slammed into something solid, rolling across a dusty floor before finally coming to a stop. My heart raced, and the silence that enveloped me felt unnatural. I strained my ears, but the shrieking shadows were gone. Gasping for air, I looked up and found myself in a narrow corridor, lined with cracked tiles and a thick layer of dust. The walls were etched with symbols, their patterns twisting in unnatural ways, like they were moving beneath the surface. Ahead, a faint light pulsed, steady and slow, almost like a heartbeat. Summoning the last of my strength, I rose and stumbled toward it, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I neared the light, it intensified, revealing a door, a real door, with a brass handle and heavy wooden frame. I reached for it, my hand trembling, and as my fingers closed around the handle, I whispered a silent prayer. I turned it, and the door creaked open, revealing the daylight